Secondly, thank you to the speakers who agreed to come and talk about this topic that's dear to our heart at Biodiversity International, which is agrobiodiversity. And thank you to the organizers. So thank you very much to NIN for inviting us to be part of this centenary celebration. We're extremely pleased to be here. It's my second time coming to Hyderabad, so it's very nice to be welcomed back. I'm very happy to be here and participating in this very important event. So my name is Gina Kennedy. I work for Biodiversity International. And this talk is going to be about agrobiodiversity. We've heard a few other lectures already about agrobiodiversity, so I hope I can introduce some new concepts. One concept, I don't think that we've seen a framework yet, but I'd like to just say that Biodiversity International is a managing partner for a CGIAR research program called Agriculture for Nutrition and Health. And within that program, we have a specific research stream on food systems for healthier diets. So that research stream of A4H, Agriculture for Nutrition and Health, has adopted this conceptual framework, particularly for explaining in a simple way in presentations and so forth what we mean by food systems. So I think a few of the speakers have already kind of gone through that it's the full set of processes from production through storage, transformation, and food retailing and provision. And I think a lot of research has been done on those aspects of food systems. Where I think that we haven't done a whole lot of research is on food environment. So I'll try and highlight a few of our research results from the food environment, consumer drivers and consumer behaviors. And then what's also important in this framework is that diet quality is at the center. So we can think of it like a bullseye on a dartboard, and what we're aiming for in our research program on food systems for healthy diets is diet quality. So that's really at the center, and then we draw outwards from that center. And as has been already said, food systems are multidimensional, so we need to think of social, cultural, environmental, economic, and political contexts, and they're complex. This is a new paper out by Chris Benet from CIAT and others, including Wageningen and the Food Systems Research Group. And what I think is really nice about it is it's a very thoughtful perspective on what different disciplines think when they talk about food systems. So there's sort of a common sentiment going around that our food systems are failing us. I think that was a lot of what was being said this morning. Our food systems are failing us. And so this paper takes a look at what does that mean and how are they failing us? And what does it mean from different perspectives? So for example, from the food security perspective, we could say our food systems are failing us. Why? Because they are not going to be able to feed the growing population. So we need to close a yield gap. We can debate whether or not we agree with that, but that's what a food security perspective would say. A nutrition security perspective would say the system is not delivering a healthy diet, and what we need to do is close the nutrient gap and ensure better diet quality. And then if you were more on the agroecology side or coming in from a ecosystem service lens, you would say the way we're producing food is unsustainable. We're using up our natural resources, we're losing agrobiodiversity, energy, water, carbon inefficiencies. What we need to do is reduce the footprint of the system on the environment. And what's important about taking a systems perspective, which is also why I like food systems research, is it can help you look at not just win-wins. It would be ideal to come up with a lot of win-wins, but you can also see trade-offs, and where if you go this way, then you might lose this. So if we go for higher quality diet, we might lose some of cereal producing yield, for example. So there's only, I think the systems perspective is helpful from that, and this is a very nice paper. This maybe is a bit of an overview. Am I too close to the microphone? Sound? Does it sound funny, Sarah? Okay. So malnutrition in all its forms is a term now used, adopted by the UN SDN committee, and really, so it's trying to just mean malnutrition in a very holistic sense. So diet quality is a problem for malnutrition in all of its forms. It could be undernutrition and stunting, it could be overweight and obesity, it could be micronutrient deficiencies, it could also be non-communicable diet-related disease. And 6 of the 11 risk factors related to diet according to global burden of disease. And then we also have this dichotomy where we're seeing dietary transitions, and it depends, of course, on the country and the context, but an increase in unhealthy components and a reduction of healthy components. So I'm not sure it's been stated so clearly. When we talk about diet quality and the unhealthy components, that's generally foods that are really high in sugar, salt, and fat. And a lot of those tend to be ultra-processed foods. So sugar-sweetened beverages, so they're empty calories, giving you mainly sugar. Snack foods, processed cookies, biscuits, these types of packaged foods, processed savory foods is what we mean when we say unhealthy components. And healthy components then are fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and pulses. This is also a very new article that came out. It's really similar to Chris Murray and what Anne presented today, but I thought it's worth at least showing again from even a different perspective. They compared the FAO food balance sheet data with the Harvard Healthy Eating Plate, and what it shows very clearly is that our global agricultural system is overproducing grains, fats, and sugars, and it is not producing enough fruits, vegetables, and proteins to meet nutritional needs of populations. So we kind of keep repeating the same things. We're looking like we have enough grains in the system, definitely we have enough sugar in the system, but what we don't have enough of is fruits and vegetables. So what shall we do about that? Increasing purchases of highly processed food, as we know, are on the rise. This is a little bit dated. I think came out of a GloPan report. The reference is a little covered by the urban bar. But as was said already today, that own production is becoming much less of a common phenomenon of purchasing. So this is breaking it down. Are your purchases of unprocessed foods, low processed food, or highly processed food? We see huge transitions to highly processed food, particularly among high income and urban areas. So this is part of the food environment that we really need to, I think, study more and pay more attention to. And this brings us a little bit into an example from Asia. This was research funded from Drivers of Food Choice in Hanoi amongst low-income consumers. So low-income consumers in Hanoi, we broke their retail outlets, so their food environment, into three typologies: modern retail, convenience stores, and traditional retail. So that would be more like wet markets and street vendors. And what we found was that 70% of, I like how they analyzed it. I didn't make the categories of food and ultra processed, as in not food, but 70% of food, meaning perishable products that we would recommend people eat more of, fish, meat, eggs, vegetables, fruits, pulses, are coming from traditional retail. And only 8% is coming from modern retail, supermarkets. Whereas the flip side, 84% of ultra-processed food is coming from convenience or modern retail. Why is this important as cities urbanize? In Vietnam, food safety is a very big issue, and the government is very concerned about the safety of perishables, particularly in traditional retail, because they feel it's very hard to regulate. So they are looking at schemes to reduce risk of food safety from traditional retail, and we're trying to make the diet quality point that if you please be careful if you do that, because right now that's where your population is sourcing their foods, also for cultural reasons. So there was a lot of qualitative research in the study. It's right now in press, and it says, fresh food I buy from the market. She means traditional market. Why do I have to eat preserved and processed food from supermarkets? This was the voice of one of our consumers. And just another fact is that the ballooning cost of health impacts, $7 trillion going to loss due to non-communicable diseases in just low and middle income countries, $760 billion related to obesity. So not only do we have this diet quality crisis, it will be affecting the pocketbook, and so you can use that when you have to speak with ministries of health, ministries of economics. So what are the solutions we propose using agrobiodiversity? First, we've generated a more specific definition, which we call food biodiversity. It's the diversity of plants, and as our chair said, also animals, fish, other organisms that are used for food. These can be both cultivated and from the wild. So this is a very wide range of possible options. We wrote a book last year called Mainstreaming Agrobiodiversity in Food Systems, and there's a specific chapter called Food Biodiversity for Healthy and Diverse Diets. And a lot of the rest of these examples are derived from that chapter if you want to know more. There's several diet quality solutions. So again, thinking about food systems and diet quality being our target that we want to achieve, our bullseye. Agrobiodiversity allows you to have available foods year-round. Seasonality is still very big, important in rural areas and also in urban markets. The nutrient density, the affordability, and the cultural acceptability. Availability, this is just one food group category, vegetables, but again, it's very new, hot off the presses, just got published, open access, please look it up, another really interesting paper. 1,097 species of cultivated vegetables, so this doesn't even include the wild vegetables. 37% of them have their center of origin in Asia or Pacific. So that's really quite a lot of species that you have at hand that you could be using. They broke them down into sort of different typologies of fruited or seeded vegetables, leafy vegetables, multi-use vegetables. You see in South Asia and in the region of India, quite a large number of species of leafy vegetables, which are very nutrient dense, and multi-use vegetables. I just had to show this again. We are really proud of the amount of seasonal food availability that can be documented. This is from Mali. There's one in progress of the same methodology, looking at what's the seasonal food availability, December through January. But it's to just bring home the fact that availability is not really the issue. Now, these might not be planted very much in the communities that we're working with, but there is quite a lot of agricultural biodiversity available. This is from our colleagues at ECRAF, and it's also showing that from Kenya, you also have year-round availability of a fresh fruit. So if you were to plant these 12 species, you could have a fresh fruit available for your family, for your community, every single month of the year. So availability is not really the issue. Nutrient density, people who know me know I love dietary diversity, and we've talked a lot about this, I think, already. Staple-based diet is not going to get you where you need to go for micronutrient requirements, whereas if we add to that white rice diet, a diversity of foods, and this would be a very ideal situation in which you could have carrots, orange, beef, spinach, and lentils, you would meet or exceed your requirements of micronutrients for the day. Just to make a point also that we can look also within species. I think Ruth made a bit of this point. This is just showing one example of one species, banana. We have so many cultivars of banana. A lot of them have their center of origin in Asia and Pacific. And I would just like to know how many of us could have a carotenoid-rich banana if we went to the markets here in Hyderabad. Could we find a carotenoid-rich banana? So there are bananas that are dark orange, dark yellow in color. Why don't we see those in our markets? In terms of affordability, this is an example of a cost of diet study in Kenya, where iron and zinc deficiencies were found in all modeled diets without wild foods in all target groups. And the target groups were children 6 to 24 months of age, broken down by the correct age groups, and lactating women. Based on our agrobiodiversity research we did in that area, we identified several species of vegetables and fruits. We chose these 3 wild vegetables and 3 wild fruits and put them into the cost of diet tool and modeled the diet. The diet's modeled with these 3 wild vegetables plus the 3 wild fruits fully made up for that lack of micronutrients in all target groups. And importantly, the cost of the diet was reduced by 72% for children and 46% for women. So you could say, well, you have to use your time to go and harvest these. That's a good point. But still, the point is that if we add this locally available agrobiodiversity, we can reduce the cost of a healthy diet. My last point that I think is really important is the cultural acceptability. A lot of people say the youth of today, they're really not interested. They want to go to fast food outlets. My kids only want to eat hamburgers and pizza. That might be true, and it does come down to what you practice in the home and how they're taught in school. But these are just to say that that's not all youth. And in particular, the little boy on the right, he's from Turkey, and he got first prize for collecting wild edible herbs. So amongst all the other competitors in the competition, it wasn't just for children. He had the traditional knowledge, and he was the knowledge holder for where all these wild herbs were, and they're all edible. So it's not only, I think, the older generation that has these. Also, I guess just in terms of acceptability, We looked at some common wild foods in Ethiopia, and I put this slide in just because we haven't talked that much, I think, yet about acceptability and cultural loss and loss of tradition. So in a food-based dietary guidelines workshop in Ethiopia, we showed this slide, and there are nutritionists in the audience going to develop food-based dietary guidelines for Ethiopia. Ask the audience, how many of you know one of these fruits, have tasted one of these fruits before? Yeah, I know that one in the middle. It used to grow in my village. Oh, I know that one over there on the far right. My grandmother used to have it. That's great. Did you like them? Yeah. When's the last time you ate them? Did you have them in the last year? No. Have your kids ever tasted one of those? No. And so you just have to ask the question back. Is that okay with you? You knew them. You grew up with them. You say you like them. So what are you going to do to change it? So one of the things we can do to change is put them in our policy documents, put them in things like food-based dietary guidelines. I know I'm running out of time, but I do like this example. It's also very different. It comes from a book called Tropical Fruit Tree Diversity with Biodiversity and others. And it's talking about farmers' motivation, because we often focus on the problem and what we do. What are the motivations of farmers for preserving their diversity? So we did have typologies of farmers, and the largest typology had 1 to 4 varieties of mango on their farm for market and income. I think that's typical. But what we don't research a lot is the other farmers. So they might be on the extreme ends of the tail, on the extreme ends of your distribution, but there are farmers who maintain 5 to 9 varieties because they want improved pollination services. They want those ecosystem services from the other varieties, or these varieties are important for their home consumption. And those farmers who maintain 10 or more, in this survey of about 150 farmers, were only 7, and they did it really for their historic interest and cultural pride. But to say, if you do this type of research, then you can discover who might be your champions, who you might tap into to get communities to be more excited about using their agrobiodiversity. Some of the reasons that came from farmers were it lengthens months of the year that I can earn money. Because even within a variety, if you plant different varieties of mango, some might mature in May, all the way June, July, August, September, if you have a longer selling season. I can also get more pollinators to come into my field, and it increased my yield by 10 to 25%, said one farmer. And they like them for different uses. This mango variety is better for pickle, this is better for juice, this is better for fresh. And I thought the last one was really quite interesting. Some of the varieties grow very tall, and the opinion of this farmer was that the birds get attracted to the tall trees, and then they leave the lower trees, which are different varieties that are used for commercial uses, and those fruits are of a nicer quality for his income. So in conclusion, we really do need to think about how we're pushing agriculture production policies. How can we orient them to what everybody this morning has said? We need more fruits and vegetables, pulses, whole grains. What are we going to do with our policies? We need to increase public awareness and consumer demand. I think there's a lot of techniques out there, and I don't think it's true that youth are not interested. We also need to introduce public procurement mechanisms that can better use agrobiodiversity. Thank you.
Introduce yourself for the audience. Congratulations, madam, for a nice presentation. You have mentioned a lot about agrobiodiversity usage, but in the meantime, think that to make best use of agrobiodiversity and develop future varieties which could be suitable not only for fresh market but also for industrial purpose, because all these crops you mentioned, they have a lot of potential bioactive compounds. Simultaneously, if we develop varieties which are good at those compounds, the product will have value for the industry as well as for the market. So it will be win-win situation for the farmers as well as for the consumer, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you, for your good points. I would refer you to the study, which was called Retail Diversity for Diet Diversity, which I think it's in a very specific context in Hanoi, Vietnam, but food safety is a huge issue there. And I guess the point about food system research and trade-offs would be that if the government policy in Vietnam would be to shut down wet markets and traditional markets because of the fear that they can't regulate, for example, pesticide residue on fruits and vegetables, and push everything to supermarkets, you will see I think it's very obvious from the data, a deterioration in diet quality. So it's not as simple as saying, we want to regulate better, therefore our solution is to cut out this one retail channel. I mean, and I'm also not a food safety expert, but having spoken with food safety experts in the context of this project, the risk to the farmers who are using the chemicals and the households of the farmers where the chemicals are being used, either incorrectly at too high levels or without the correct safety equipment, is very high. Risk to consumer, if you wash properly and maybe do some preparations, is much, much less. So I think there's also that interesting perceived as compared to real risk in terms of fruit and vegetable and pesticide residues. And in terms of industry, that's a very good point, and we're working more and more with private sector to try and see also how they can use these different varieties. For example, the banana cultivars that I mentioned that are high in vitamin A, we're working with food industry to see if they can be made into powders to fit into forages and things for complementary feeding. So that's a very good point, and I think that is very relevant. It's already been mentioned that economics and income has to factor in here for farmers to grow and businesses to bring it on. So thank you.